Is that next big opportunity for your business as good as it sounds? We're going to talk about distractions in business and why 90% of the things that come your way are actually a big distraction in keeping you from growing and scaling that incredible business that you have. Hey, my name is Blake Benz. I'm the host of the Good Advice Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning into the show today. We're going to get into it. Before we do, though, we have a word from one of the amazing businesses that have sponsored today's episode. Check out this quick ad, and we'll be right back soon. Do you ever feel like your payment processor is robbing you blind? For some of us, it's not blind. We look at the amount of money that's going to our payment processor month after month, and a lot of times we ask ourselves, is there a better way? I'm making good money, yet so much of it isn't actually ending up in my pocket. In the world of payment processing, in many cases, it's a cashless world, so you have to have a payment processor you can really trust. I personally am a big fan of Brad Norwood, who's the owner of PrimePaymentsUSA.com. Brad's a business owner himself. He knows all the challenges that come with running a business. More importantly, he knows the value of an individual customer. See, some of these bigger businesses, they're all about scale. They're all about bringing in as many customers as possible. But do they know your name? Do they know your business? Do they know what's important to you? In many cases, the answer is no. And in worst cases, they're just looking to get as much money from every transaction that you work hard for, which really doesn't feel too good. So you got to reach out to Brad Norwood today and understand how he's doing business and why it can save you money month after month. More importantly, you might even ask him about his zero-fee payment processing that he's offering to a select few of people. Go to PrimePaymentsUSA.com and start putting the money that you worked hard for back into your pocket. All right, so let's talk about it today. This is a conversation that I've had. I've been in business for 7 years. I've had so many conversations. I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of conversations with different business owners and people at all different stages of their business. And I want to talk about something that has come up many times. It is something that, I've had variations of this conversation more times than I can count, and it typically goes something like this. A person has, and by the way, I'll give a little background here. I literally just had this conversation again on Tuesday at my growth group. Growth group, by the way, I get people who ask about it, who want to know about it. Growth Group is our free event on Tuesday mornings at Red Kite in Springdale. It's always at 9 a.m. And it is open to anyone who's a business owner or sales professional or what have you. And it's not a pitch event. It's not a sales event. It's very much an event where you can talk about your business and give advice and also get advice. So that's the heart and soul of that event. So this actually came up on Tuesday. And I don't want to, sometimes I'm a little bit careful in telling stories because I don't want to make anyone in particular look bad or sound bad or what have you. But there is a very important educational moment that came from this conversation. And again, I've had conversations like these so many times over the years. And it goes something like this. You run a business and an opportunity comes across your desk, so to speak, that is too good to pass up. It's something that you've been thinking about for a long time, and now the opportunity is here. And I'll give a couple of variations of this, the way this kind of instance pops up. One example would be that whenever you started your business, you really wanted this certain web domain. You weren't able to get that web domain. It was too expensive. Maybe it was like $15,000, $20,000. I'll give a made up example. Getgoodadvice.com. If that was a domain I wasn't able to get because the price tag was too high and it finally came up, it would be foolish to purchase that because there's no instance in this world where spending that kind of money would ever get me an important enough ROI back unless it already had like a massive brand appeal or massive brand name associated with it. Now, we do see this sometimes with large corporations who have intent efforts around a certain domain, or they want a certain domain or what have you. But for the average small business owner, the domain really doesn't matter. Or maybe even a better example of this would be, let's say you own the .net or .co, like .co, or .io for your web domain, and the .com address becomes available, but it's several $1,000s. Chances are it's not going to give you the money back that you spend on it to get that. But what happens is, as a business owner, this thing pops up and you think, oh my gosh, I have to get this. It's finally here. This is an example of a distraction in your business. It's something that we get emotionally invested in, and we don't always think objectively about it. In the instance of the specific situation on Tuesday mornings, there was someone who had an idea, a pivot for their business or a new opportunity for the business. And the person said, I can basically buy this opportunity for $750 a month in perpetuity. And it's a great deal and yada, yada, yada. And, basically, this is also part of the reason why I don't really work with new business owners anymore, by the way, because I found myself really having to convince people that their ideas were not good ideas. And what I found over the years is I started reframing my conversation with people, where when someone would bring a new business idea to me, I would, from the get-go, I would typically ask, hey, are you looking for someone to hear about the idea? Are you looking for someone to encourage you? Or do you really want to know what I think? And I would give that disclaimer because I found myself over the years being the negative Nancy in someone's corner and giving an honest opinion on their business idea and how it wasn't a good idea, or maybe not a good idea, maybe just full of risk that had not been appropriately appreciated. That risk had not been appropriately recognized. I'll give another example. I was talking to someone at the end of 2020 as the shutdown was ending, and this person wanted to start a restaurant. They wanted to open a restaurant. And I said, okay, restaurants are extremely expensive. How much money do you have? And this individual had something like $20,000 set aside, which, by the way, it's not a lot to start a restaurant with. And then I asked, okay, well, what's your experience in restaurants? Like, have you worked in a restaurant before? No, I never have. Okay. Have you ever been like a chef or a cook? Or no, I haven't. Okay. Have you ever run a business before? Have you ever had to hire people before? No, I haven't. Okay. So in every instance, you lack the experience that you would want to have to do something like this. And not to mention, you are also doing something in an industry that is extremely risky. Restaurants have terrible margins. Costs are very high in restaurants. I think about a friend of mine who had a burger joint in Springdale that unfortunately had to close down a couple of years ago. This guy was incredibly business savvy, incredibly smart. And the bottom line is sometimes we overestimate our own abilities and how easy something is, instead of recognizing that, okay, that game right there, that's a very difficult game to play. So I think about my friend who, again, incredibly business smart, just a smart guy, and the business was not able to survive. It's just the reality of it, that there are business things that are very difficult. And I had a mentor once who described it to me as crystal balls and rubber balls, where he said, when you make mistakes, when you drop things, you want to make sure that what you drop is a rubber ball, because when you drop it, you bounce back. It bounces back, but it doesn't permanently maim you as an organization. Crystal balls, when you drop a crystal ball, it shatters. It's broken forever. And unfortunately, over the years, it deeply pains me to think about people I've talked to who had $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, and who spent every single penny of it. And spent it thinking it would be easier than it would be, that it's a no-brainer, there's no risk. I'll even say today, I'm very hyper aware of this when I talk to potential prospects and people who work with me. We almost always talk about revenue. We almost always talk about budget from the get-go. When I talk to someone and they say, "Yeah, I literally had a conversation with someone several years ago, probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, and she sold women's journals." And I said, "Okay, well, let's talk about your revenue. Like, how many have you sold?" And these were like a $20 journal, $30 journal. I said, "How many have you sold?" And she had been in business for, I think, like a year or a year and a half or something. So I said, "How many have you sold?" And she said, 12. And I said, "Okay, 12 this week or like this month?" And she goes, "No, 12 total." And so I'm thinking, okay, you've made a few $100. Why in the world would you spend any money on me? Like, why would you spend so much money on a business model that clearly is not working? And what happens typically is someone comes along and one of two things happens. Someone who doesn't have any experience, they say, "Man, you really got to do this. Like, you really got to write a book, or you really got to hire a consultant, or you really got to get a marketer, or you really got to do ads." This is actually one of the most harmful things that I ran into when I started my business. Was I didn't know what I was doing. And I talked to a guy who he was like, "Man, you need to run ads. You need to run ads on Facebook. You need to spend money, and you're going to make that money back. You're not going to make it back immediately, but you're going to make it back." I spent thousands on Facebook. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was doing what this other person said, "Yeah, you should be doing that." And I lost a lot of money. I mean, I probably spent, geez, 7, 8, 9, $10,000. And this was, 5 years ago. So, I mean, even 5 years, I feel like that's so much more money then than it was today. But it was a lot of the startup cash I could have used elsewhere. And it was a very painful mistake, especially with this person being like, "Oh, it's a no-brainer. It's so easy. It's so simple." When in fact, it wasn't so easy. It wasn't so simple. And it was an incredibly risky decision. So either you have something like that happen, or worse, you have people who are really slimy marketers or salespeople or what have you, who try to convince you that there's no risk, that it's a no-brainer, that, yeah, of course you need to spend your money here. And I think of this. I talked to a lady who, this was years ago, but she was going to spend pretty much all the money she had in this high-profile, very visible consultant person, this guru. And I said, "Man, I would be very careful. That's every dollar you have. I'd be very careful." And she said, "No, there's a money back guarantee. Like, if I don't get results, I get the money back." And I said, "Man, I get that they're saying that, but you have to understand that these people, there's almost no instance where these people are going to let you have that money back." And as the years have gone on, I've seen many variations of this. I remember I saw one individual who had an extensive explanation of how he would, aside from chargebacks, which not everyone is in a position to do that, or they haven't paid in a way that enables them to be able to do that. But aside from chargebacks, this individual had a fairly wieldy process for proving that the person who wanted a refund was actually the one at fault. Meaning, you didn't do it right, you didn't do the things I told you to, it's your fault. Like, when someone says no risk, money back guaranteed, you have to understand, you have to take that with a grain of salt. And unfortunately, with the individual that I just mentioned, it didn't work for her, nor was she able to get her money back. That's the unfortunate pain of it all. But you had someone explaining that it's a no-brainer. It's easy. It's simple. So it's not always people who do this, though. Sometimes we are the biggest offenders ourselves. And I'll mention the individual I was speaking to on Tuesday morning, who was talking about a $750 investment per month, and said, "Yeah, it's that's all it is. It's $750 a month." And I had to point out, it's not just $750 a month. It's $750 gets you started. $750 a month gets you started doing this. I mean, you're looking at, how much is that, by the way? What is that? For over a year? Is that $9,000? Something like that? That's almost 10 grand a year just to have this thing, just to have this opportunity. And it doesn't take into account any other costs, the cost of your time, your capacity, literal costs. I think as people, we have a very difficult time understanding, is something an opportunity or a distraction? And ultimately, I think I think it really does all come back to risk, how we handle risk. We as entrepreneurs and as business professionals suck at appropriately judging risk. We are often far too optimistic. We are often not good at judging the actual process for getting results. I see this with, I saw it in myself. I thought, I'm going to quit my job and start Good Advice. And man, I make so much money. And then like month one came and I had no customers. And I was like, okay, wait a second. Hang on. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I mentioned I don't really work with new business owners anymore, but the number of times people would come to me and they'd say, there's actually kind of like a stereotype or a meme around this of like, it's my idea is Uber, but better. Or I had a gentleman one time who we were talking about his business he was trying to launch. And I said, well, explain it to me. And he was like, it's like Facebook, but better. And at the time, I think Facebook was a however many $billion business. But I was like, really? Like you legitimately think you're about to launch the Facebook killer? Now, I think sometimes there's survivorship bias. We hear the story of the random rags to riches person who grew a business and we think I can do that. And one thing that's been true about me is I've always tried to be as perfectly honest with myself. Perfectly honest is the wrong way to put it. I've tried to be, I've tried to not be presumptive about my abilities, and I have tried to be intently aware of what I'm not good at. I think what makes me a good consultant after 7 years is not because I'm a business prodigy. No, it's because I've made endless amounts of mistakes. And I've also found some things that have worked really well. When you work with me, you're not working with someone who's a business genius. Unfortunately, I'm not that guy. And here's what I'll say. I'm comfortable saying that because the longer I've been in business and the more I've seen people rise and fall, the more I've realized that, in fact, many people are not business geniuses. Some people get lucky. Some people have perfect timing. And a very small fraction of people, infinitely small, they get it. It clicks. It clicks in a way that no one else can replicate. And those people are 1 in a million. Again, survivorship bias. We assume we're all like that. Slimy marketers will sell you like that. It's so easy. Just send this one email. And you'll make all this money. And they forget to mention that they've been building their email marketing company for the last 20 years. They have endless connections, endless network referrals, and all these different things that help them build the business. And you're a random dude in Milwaukee who quit your job yesterday, and you're taking what little is left in your savings to buy this service that you know nothing about. It's like the person starting a restaurant who's never been in the restaurant business. We're not great at judging risk, at assessing risk. And it doesn't help. Again, there's people on social in our world, salespeople, what have you, who downplay and minimize risk. I said this a minute ago, and I think it's very true. I think the difference between opportunity and distraction is this risk factor. If this was to fail, what would that mean for your business? If this was to fail, what would it mean for your quality of life? If all you have is $10,000, are you comfortable with it being gone in 2 months or 3 months. Man, I wish someone had told me that. My first year in business was very hard. It was very hard because I spent a lot of money. I spent way too much money. When I say a lot of money, 15 grand at least, pretty much everything we had. And I spent it very quickly. I was so naive. I had a person who took a lot of money from me. I paid them unwisely a lot of money. And I mentioned this on another episode, but I still remember my wife. Now he's gonna do what he says, right? And I was like, babe, why would he lie? You can't lie on the internet. So naive. I think part of what makes me a great salesperson today is I try to do a really great job of identifying risk with people, with prospects. I think also what makes me a really terrible salesperson is I point out the risks to my prospects. I was talking to a gentleman. I sent a proposal over just yesterday, or maybe the day before, for someone who runs a very small business. I say small, I mean, just average size business. But um, and man, I've had this conversation actually a few times in the last couple of months. But they were asking for a marketing quote for SEO, and I gave them a quote, and it's about $12.50 a month. But I did mention I had a $5.99 a month offer, which was a typical offer in the company that I bought, and we're trying to phase that out and stick to our $12.50 a month offer, with some play area in between for customers I really like. But I pointed out to him, I said, man, you should really think about your marketing budget. If $5.99 a month is the entirety of your marketing budget, it's the sink or swim around getting new customers. For SEO, I don't know if this is the right play for you, because some things that are true about SEO, it takes a long time. It takes a long time. It takes a year. I mean, it doesn't take a year, but a year is a good time to estimate it. And it doesn't guarantee sales. What it does is it guarantees rankings. It gets you ranking on Google. You often still have to sell people. You still have to make sure the website's built in a way that can convert them. And there's lots of things that go alongside that. So my advice to him was, hey, this is the entirety of your marketing budget, and this is everything you need to generate revenue in the next year. You should be really mindful of that. I don't know if I would spend my money here. Again, I think that's what makes me a great salesperson, is pointing out risk, being candid, and it's how I do business. I think this is something we should all live by, is doing good business means caring more about the person you're serving than your own bottom line. The interest in my bottom line is make the sale. But for this individual, it's, hey, I want you to really process this. There's no swindling. There's no dazzling lights. There's no, pizzazz in this conversation. Let's talk about it as it is. It's my job to consult you. It's my job to be clear and candid on how this works so that we can have a great long-term relationship. But again, it makes me a terrible salesperson because I'm not closing the sale. I had another conversation with a gentleman 3 or 4 months ago who runs a junk removal business. Same conversation. We were talking about his revenue, and I said, what's your revenue like? Are you doing 10K months? And he said, no, not yet. And I said, okay, so let's talk about what that number is. And he gave me a number, and it was a bit lower than 10K. And I said, okay, so are you comfortable with spending $12.50 a month? Are you comfortable with spending, like, of the money you're making? And this isn't, by the way, thinking about this appropriately. If you make $6,000 a month, for example, it's not $6,000 in your pocket. You have the cost of doing business, cost of your services to you. If you have team members, it's your overhead to those individuals, and then whatever money you're going to pay yourself. So left over, I mean, that could be from $6,000 a month. That could be $2,000 or $3,000, depending on the nature of the business. So it was basically like, hey, are you comfortable taking every dollar you have left and putting it into this? And he said, well, I don't know. I mean, do you think it'll work? And I said, I don't know. I don't know if it'll work. That's me being candid and transparent. But you should be thinking of, how do I feel about spending that kind of money over the course of a year, and what would that mean for your business? Now, if you're able to live off that margin and you feel comfortable making this a priority of your marketing strategy, let's do it. But if this is my business is failing and I need something desperately to change, save the money. Don't do this. I have that exact same conversation with people in the consulting world, consulting side of the business, or say, hey, our conversation is going to be about growing the business, increasing revenue, but it's not a lifeline. It's not my business is failing, so let me throw money at anything and hope that it's going to work. We really try to help people recognize risk, and we try to make sure that it makes sense from an opportunity standpoint. And if it doesn't, then it's a distraction. Whenever I was talking to the individual who owned the marketing company that I bought this last year, that was majorly the difference maker. When he and I first spoke about the business and he had his terms for the marketing company and how he wanted to sell it and what he wanted to sell it for, I saw huge distraction in my mind because the risk was too great. The risk was way too great. And over time, that risk shifted where effectively he called me in May and it was like, hey, you tell me how you want to buy this thing. I'm done. You tell me what you want to do this, how you want to do this. And I was able to set the terms where the risk was very small, but the opportunity was great. I think that's the insight. I think that's the hidden gem, is a lot of marketers and salespeople, they love to flip this conversation where you say, well, what if it doesn't work? And they say, but what if it does? And I think that's an appropriate way to think of it sometimes. I try to have a hands wide open approach. I try not to be fear-based, but abundance-based. I think there's some healthy ways that you can use that as a basic philosophy in your life. But maybe I'm jaded. Maybe I'm cynical because I see that as the norm and sort of semi-blurring the line of dishonest conversations where I find myself on the other side of things where someone's like, this is going to be huge. It's going to be amazing. And I say, well, what if it isn't? What if it isn't? How would you feel to spend every dollar you have and it not work? What would that mean for you? Well, that would ruin my family financially. Okay, then don't do that thing. Oh, we'd have to take out a loan. It would set us back 5-6 years. Okay, then don't do that thing. I was talking to a customer, this would have been probably about a year and a half ago, and $250,000 a year business. And he wanted to spend, I think it was like 5 or 10K on a marketing avenue. And we were chatting over and we really didn't get to a final point on if he should do this thing or not. And I said, man, honestly, if you feel good about it, I think I feel good about it. The math makes sense to me. This wasn't with me. This was for another service outside of us. And we were processing the decision together. And I said, man, you might just throw the money at it and see where it goes. And like worst case scenario, you're out $5,000, $10,000. Like that's the worst case scenario. You don't lose any sleep at night. You're running a $250,000 a year business. So you don't lose any sleep at night. It'd be a bummer, but you'd learn something from it. I don't give that advice, by the way, to the person who has sold 12 journals. To that person, it's, hey, you need to be mindful of every dollar you're putting away on this. It's all about mitigating risk. It's also why, what's that book, by the way? Oh gosh, there's a book about like 10 million is easier than 1 million or something like that. You guys know what I'm talking about? I'm like butchering this. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the whole premise of the book is that once you hit like $1 million, the next 10 million is much easier than that first million. Well, of course it's easier. The opportunity is greater than the risk. The opportunity is greater than the distractions because you can afford to make decisions and it not ruin you. And I think sometimes, again, people like to present things as they got it on their first try. And it's like, no, it's survivorship bias. You see the investment that worked, that the person talked about publicly. You don't see the 30 failures. I mean, literally just the other day, I posted on Facebook about October. We closed out October. It was the biggest month I've ever had in the history of Good Advice. Biggest month I've ever had in 7 years. Which, speaking of abundance mindset, there's so much talk about the economy, fair talk about the economy. It can really make people panic. It can really make people think that no one's making any money. And then I just had the best month I've ever had, ever. It should be an insight that, don't let the news cycle direct your perspective on your business, but have a healthy perspective on what's actually working and where are the opportunities. That's just a random segue. But I posted about that, and it would be a shame for someone, and that was a post to celebrate, and, man, these things are pinging, these things are working. I'm really happy about it. There's a little bit of a marketing spin on that. I think I put on there like, hey, reach out to me for 2026. And I got people who did reach out about that, by the way. So like it's two purpose, to celebrate and also market. All that stuff's fine. But it would be a shame for someone to read that and think that Blake's never had bad months, or Blake's never had a difficult time, or there haven't been times when the money hasn't been there, or the money's been very tight. I mean, I think this was summer of 2023, summer of 2024. Oh man, 2 years ago. So summer 2023. Summer 2023, I think from like June till September, I don't know if I closed a single sale. Like it was like a 3-month, maybe 2-month process where all I had coming in was recurring revenue. But in terms of like new customers, whenever I'm on a sales call, I can know that every few conversations is going to close. About every few conversations is going to close. Sometimes it's better than that. Sometimes it's a little worse than that. Well, I had a few calls in like June. None of them closed. Had a couple more. None of them closed. Got into July thinking, all right, I'm due. I'm due, right? This is gambler's fallacy, by the way. But I thought, I'm due. None of them closed in July. None of them closed in August. And I was like, dude, what is going on here? This is bad. This is real bad. I'm getting real nervous. Now, fortunately, it all picked up by the end of the year. It was fine. But, people don't always hear about that kind of stuff. People don't always, and, talking about, I think the invoice that I posted that was fully paid was like a $9,500 invoice. So many other invoices that never get paid, or contracts that go dead, or deals that are for sure going to close and then they don't close. I mean, I think that same year I had a $30,000 invoice or contract that was for sure going to close. The decision maker was like, it's for sure going to close. It's a no-brainer. And then it didn't close. And I think I've had a handful of deals like that were just for sure and then just didn't happen. So that's just a little bit of an encouragement to those of you listening that, as you see people succeed, don't assume it's easier than it really is. It's hard, it's challenging, and it's all, again, about weighing risk. What's the return on my investment? What's the risk here? Is this a crystal ball or is this a rubber ball? And honestly, a big thing that's part of this is our own feelings. Not being hyper excited about it, hyper focused on it, over emotional on it. Oh man, I've wanted this domain name for forever. I can finally get it for $15,000. Separating the emotion from it and doing an honest assessment on, does the opportunity outweigh the risk? Hey, thanks for listening to today's Good Advice podcast episode. If you're a first-time listener, what are you waiting on? Click the subscribe or follow button so you can keep getting good advice wherever you are. Don't forget, you can also support the podcast on our Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice. For as little as $5, I used to call it a cup of coffee. Cups of coffee are a little pricier these days, but for $5 a month, you can support the podcast. You can check that out. So thank you to all of our supporters, and thank you to the businesses who sponsor on the podcast. I so appreciate you. And that's today's Good Advice. We'll see you later.